The station was bigger than anything I'd ever seen. It hung in space like a small moon, covered in lights that blinked in patterns he didn't understand. His shuttle moved closer, passing dozens of alien ships. Some looked like crystals, others like living organisms. Each one belonged to a species that had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. Adjusted his collar and looked at the two people sitting across from him. Colonel 1 sat perfectly still, her military uniform crisp and clean. She had been a soldier for 20 years and her face showed no emotion. Next to her, Doctor kept tapping on his, reading files about the alien species they were about to meet. He pushed his glasses up his nose every few seconds, a nervous habit. Ambassador, we're about to dock, the pilot announced from the front. Took a deep breath. He was Earth's voice today. 300 billion humans were counting on him. The weight of it pressed on his shoulders like a physical thing. The shuttle docked with a soft thud. The door opened with a hiss and a wall of sound hit them. The corridor beyond was filled with aliens, creatures with too many arms, beings made of what looked like liquid metal, things that floated without legs. All of them stopped and stared at the three humans. A tall figure approached them. It looked like a walking pillar of blue crystal, light pulsing through its body. A device around what might be its neck spoke in perfect English. Ambassador of Earth, I am Prime Arbiter, follow me. They walked through corridors that seemed to go on forever. Everywhere, aliens stopped what they were doing to watch them. Some pointed. Others made sounds the translation devices couldn't interpret, kept his back straight and his face calm, even though his heart was racing. The council chamber was enormous. 12 platforms rose from the floor, arranged in a circle. On each platform sat representatives of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful species. The humans were led to a small platform in the center, far below the others. It felt like standing at the bottom of a well while giants looked down at you. Humans of Earth, the Prime Arbiter's voice boomed through the chamber. You have been summoned before the Galactic Council to hear our judgment on your species. Judgment, not greeting, not welcome, judgment. The Prime Arbiter continued. For 10,000 years, the Council has maintained peace and order across 200 star systems. We have guided young species toward civilization. We have prevented wars. We have ensured prosperity. Now, humanity must take its place in this order. A hologram appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed human ships, human colonies, human mining operations across a dozen star systems. Your species has expanded aggressively, another council member said. This one looked like a massive insect, its voice clicking and buzzing. You have built warships. You have fortified your worlds. You show all the signs of a hostile species. We built defenses because we didn't know what was out here, said, his voice steady. We were alone in space for centuries before we met you. Silence, the Prime Arbiter commanded. You will speak only when given permission. One's hand tightened on her armrest, but she stayed quiet, made a small note on his. Prime Arbiter gestured, and a new document appeared in the hologram. These are the terms of your integration into galactic society. First, you will surrender all military vessels to Council control. Second, you will submit to Council oversight of all your worlds. Third, you will accept junior species status for 500 years. During this time, you will provide resources and labor as directed by the Council. You will follow all Council laws. You will make no independent diplomatic contact with other species. Felt his stomach drop. 500 years. This is standard procedure, the Prime Arbiter said. His tone suggested he was explaining something obvious to a child. Every species that joins the Council passes through this probationary period. It ensures you learn proper civilization. It protects the galaxy from potential threats. It has worked successfully for. Successfully for whom? One muttered, too quiet for the translation devices to pick up. Studied the terms. Surrender all weapons, give up control of their worlds, become servants for 5 centuries. 20 generations of humans would live under alien rule. May I ask a question? The Prime Arbiter paused. Speak. Has any species ever refused these terms? For a moment, absolute silence filled the chamber. Then the Prime Arbiter made a sound that might have been laughter. Refuse. No species has ever been so foolish. To refuse the Council is to choose isolation, poverty, and eventual extinction. We control the trade routes. We control the technology sharing. We control access to habitable worlds. Without the Council, a young species cannot survive. What about the species that were here before the Council? Asked suddenly. What happened to them? Several Council members shifted uncomfortably on their platforms. The Prime Arbiter's crystal body pulsed with darker colors. That is not relevant to this discussion. But it was relevant, and they all knew it. Had spent months researching galactic history. The Council didn't create galactic civilization. They had taken control of it, and somewhere along the way, several powerful species had disappeared from the records. You have 48 hours to accept these terms, the Prime Arbiter declared. Return to your ship, consult with your leaders, but understand this. The Council's offer is not a negotiation. It is reality. You will accept or you will face the consequences. Every species learns this eventually. The only question is how much they suffer before they understand. The platform they stood on began to descend, lowering them toward the exit. As they sank below the level of the Council members, looked up at the 12 species that ruled the galaxy. They looked back with expressions that ranged from boredom to contempt. Not one of them seemed to think humanity might actually refuse. Back in the shuttle, nobody spoke until they were clear of the station. Finally, one broke the silence. They're bullies, sophisticated, ancient bullies, but bullies all the same. They've been doing this for 10,000 years, said, still typing notes. They have the system perfected. Economic pressure, social isolation, the threat of military action, and they make it seem like it's for your own good. Stared out the window at the massive station shrinking behind them. Get me a direct line to President Jin. Encrypted, highest priority. What are you going to recommend? One asked. I'm going to give her the facts and let Earth decide, said. But personally, he smiled, and it wasn't a friendly expression. I think it's time someone taught the Council what happens when you try to bully humanity. The shuttle turned toward the jump point that would take them to the relay station. From there, they could send messages to Earth. In 48 hours, they would have to return with an answer. Suspected it would be an answer the Galactic Council had never heard before. Behind them, the station continued its eternal orbit, and on its platforms, the Council members returned to their business. They had delivered ultimatums to hundreds of species. This one would be no different. They were wrong. The emergency session of the Global Assembly began at midnight, Geneva time. Representatives from every nation on Earth joined, either in person or through holographic projection. President Jin stood at the podium, her face projected on screens across the planet. Behind her, Defense Minister Min waited with a stack of classified documents. Members of the Assembly, Jin began. Ambassador has transmitted the full terms of the Council's ultimatum. I will not soften his words. They demand our complete surrender. She played the recording from the Council chamber. The Assembly watched in silence as the Prime Arbiter delivered his ultimatum. When it ended, the chamber erupted. Representatives shouted in dozens of languages. Some demanded immediate acceptance. Others called for war. A few just sat in stunned silence. Jin let them argue for 10 minutes, then raised her hand. The chamber slowly quieted. I understand your anger. I share it. But we must think clearly. Minister Min will present our military assessment. Min stepped forward. He was an old soldier with gray hair and scars from the resource wars. He had fought in actual trenches before the world united. The Council has military superiority in numbers, he said bluntly. They have 12 species worth of ships and weapons, but our intelligence suggests something interesting. He displayed a series of tactical analyses. The Council hasn't fought a real war in 8,000 years. Their ships are designed for intimidation and police actions against unarmed civilians. They use rigid formations and predictable strategies. Meanwhile, humanity has never stopped fighting. We fought each other for. We learned tactics, adaptation, and innovation through blood and fire. A representative from Brazil stood. Are you saying we could win a war against them? No, Min said honestly. I'm saying we could make it extremely costly enough that they might think twice. The Council maintains power through the illusion of invincibility. No one has ever made them bleed. They don't know if they can handle real resistance. Another representative, this one from Kenya, raised her hand. But even if we survive a war, what then? They control the trade routes. They control access to resources we need. They could starve us slowly. That's where you're wrong, a new voice said. Doctor entered the chamber, her tablet glowing with data. She was young for such an important position, barely 30, but she had revolutionized humanity's understanding of galactic politics. May I address the Assembly, Madam President? Jin nodded. Please, Doctor, we need your expertise. Projected her research across every screen. The Council's power is built on a lie. They claim to control everything, but look at the actual data. 40% of star systems with habitable worlds are unclaimed. There are trade routes they don't patrol. There are resources they don't extract. Why? Because they don't have the capacity to control everything. They just convinced everyone that they do. She pulled up economic charts. Look at their trade system. It's designed to create dependence. Junior species provide raw materials and labor. In return, they get just enough technology and food to survive, but never enough to thrive. It's not cooperation. It's extraction. It's a protection racket on a galactic scale. The chamber went quiet as representatives studied her data. She continued, but here's the critical point. We don't need them. We've been expanding without their help. We've developed our own technology. We've found our own resources. Yes, it's been harder than if we had their support, but we did it. We're not dependent on them." "What about the other species?" someone asked. "Won't they see us as outcasts?" Smiled. "I've been monitoring communications from non-council species. There are hundreds of them living on the margins of galactic society. Some were rejected by the council. Others chose to stay independent but live in fear. They watch us. And many of them are hoping we'll say no, because if we can stand up to the council, maybe they can too." The debate continued for hours. Some argued that 500 years of subjugation was better than extinction. Others insisted that freedom was worth any price. Historical examples were cited. Earth's own past was examined, the nations that had surrendered to empires and the ones that had fought for independence. Finally, Jin called for order. "We will vote, but first I want to share something personal." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "My grandmother lived through the resource wars. She watched her country surrender to foreign occupation because they thought they had no choice. She spent 40 years under that occupation. When she finally saw liberation, she told me something I've never forgotten. She said, 'The moment you accept someone else's boot on your neck, you forget what it feels like to stand straight.'" Jin's voice grew stronger. "The council is asking us to kneel for 500 years. They're asking our children's children's children to live as servants. They promise that after 5 centuries, they'll let us stand as equals. But my grandmother taught me that oppressors never give freedom willingly. Freedom is taken, or it doesn't exist at all." The chamber was absolutely silent now. Every eye was on the president. "I will not tell you how to vote," Jin said. "This decision belongs to all of humanity, not just to me. But I will tell you what I believe. I believe that we didn't claw our way up from the caves, survive ice ages, conquer diseases, end wars, unite our species, and reach for the stars just to kneel before aliens who think age gives them the right to rule. I believe humanity's greatest strength has always been our refusal to accept that anything is impossible. And I believe that saying no to bullies is right, even when it's dangerous." The vote took 3 hours. Every nation, every representative, every voice was heard. When the final count appeared on the screens, it was unanimous. Not a single abstention, not a single dissent. Humanity rejected the council's terms. The chamber erupted in applause, but Jin raised her hand again. "Now comes the hard part. Minister Min, activate Protocol Fortress. Get our fleets ready. Admiral Ho should prepare for worst-case scenarios. Doctor, begin reaching out to every independent species you can find. Offer them partnership, not subjugation." Min nodded and immediately left to begin implementation, pulled up her list of contacts, and started drafting messages. Jin turned to her communications director. "Send a message to Ambassador. Tell him Earth has made its decision. Tell him we stand behind him completely. And tell him to deliver our answer in a way the Council will never forget." Across human space, the response to Earth's decision was swift. Shipyards increased production to maximum capacity. Mining colonies doubled their output. Military personnel reported for duty. Scientists shared their research freely, knowing that humanity's survival might depend on rapid innovation. Colony worlds activated defense systems that had been built in secret over the past decade, just in case. But it wasn't just military preparation. Artists created works celebrating human independence. Musicians composed anthems. Teachers explained to children what was happening and why it mattered. Families recorded messages for each other, just in case. Everyone understood that the next few months might change everything. On the moon base Luna Station, Admiral Ho assembled his fleet commanders. "The Council thinks we're primitives playing with starships," he told them. "Let's show them what primitives can do when you threaten their freedom. We might not win, but we'll make damn sure they remember us." The message reached Shuttle as it orbited the relay station. He read it 3 times, then showed it to one end. One grinned like a wolf, pushed his glasses up and nodded slowly. "Well said, I guess we're making history, one way or another." In 48 hours, they would return to the Council station. They would stand before the 12 species that ruled the galaxy, and they would speak a word that hadn't been spoken to the Council in 10,000 years. No. The Council chamber looked exactly the same as it had 2 days ago. The same 12 platforms, the same arrangement, the same sense of ancient power. But this time, when walked to the center platform, he walked differently. His back was, his steps were measured and deliberate. One flanked him, both carrying loaded with information. The gallery around the chamber was fuller this time. Word had spread that the humans were returning with their answer, and representatives from dozens of species had come to witness what everyone assumed would be a formality. The Prime Arbiter's crystal body pulsed with satisfied colors. "Ambassador, you have consulted with your leaders. You have had time to understand the reality of your situation. Present your acceptance of the Council's terms, and we will begin the integration process." placed his on the podium in front of him. Prime Arbiter, members of the Council, I thank you for receiving us again. Before I deliver Earth's response, I request permission to address several points regarding your ultimatum. A ripple of surprise went through the Council. Species didn't usually request permission to speak. They simply accepted and moved on, but the Prime Arbiter gestured for him to continue. Speak, if you must, but be brief. You have accused humanity of aggressive expansion, began. You claim we have built too many ships, fortified too many worlds, and shown hostile intent. I would like to present some historical records. Activated the first display. Images appeared in the hologram, showing the early space programs of several Council species. This is the expansion 12,000 years ago. In your first century of space travel, you colonized 16 worlds and built a fleet of 3,000 warships. This is the expansion 8,000 years ago. 23 colonies, 5,000 ships. This is the expansion 6,000 years ago. 41 colonies, 8,000 ships. More images appeared, cycling through each Council species. Every one showed massive military buildup and rapid expansion. By comparison, said, humanity has colonized 9 worlds in 2 centuries and built a fleet of 800 ships. We are the least aggressive expanding species in this chamber. The Prime Arbiter's colors shifted to darker shades. That was different. Those were different times. Different how? Asked. You all expanded aggressively when you were young. You all built weapons to defend yourselves. The only difference is that you did it before the Council existed. You made the rules after you secured your power. Now you use those rules to prevent anyone else from achieving what you achieved. A Council member that looked like a cloud of luminous gas spoke up. We expanded in a lawless galaxy. We created the Council to bring order. You created the Council to maintain your dominance, one said sharply, and you disguise it as civilization. Enough, the Prime Arbiter commanded. Ambassador, deliver your acceptance so we can conclude this matter. Pulled up another file. Before I do, there's one more thing. You mentioned that the 500-year probationary period is for our own good, that it teaches civilization and protects the galaxy. But I had my science officer research what actually happens during this period. Go over displaying economic data. Junior species provide 70% of the Council's raw materials. They provide 85% of the labor force in hazardous industries. They pay tribute that amounts to 40% of their gross domestic product. In return, they receive access to obsolete technology and limited trade rights. The math is simple. This isn't a probationary period. It's institutionalized exploitation. How dare you, a Council member hissed. This one resembled a massive armored crustacean. We have lifted hundreds of species out of barbarism. Have you? Asked. Because we found something interesting in the historical records. 70 years ago, a species called the completed their probationary period. They were granted full Council status. 3 years later, they mysteriously vanished from all records. Their worlds were absorbed into Council territory. What happened to them? Silence, the kind of silence that confirms suspicion. The same thing happened to the 112 years ago, added, and the 200 years ago. Species that complete their probation and have resources the Council wants tend to disappear. Species that complete probation and have nothing valuable are allowed to exist as minor members with no real voice. The gallery erupted in shocked murmurs. Many of the watching species had never heard this information. The Council had buried it well, but not well enough to hide from determined researchers with access to old databases. The Prime Arbiter's entire crystal body turned dark red. These accusations are outrageous. You know nothing of galactic politics. You are children playing with concepts you cannot understand. Then explain it to us, said calmly. Explain why species keep disappearing. Explain why the Council hoards advanced technology instead of sharing it. Explain why you prevent species from forming independent alliances. Explain why you reacted with such hostility when we simply asked questions. We do not need to explain ourselves to you, the Prime Arbiter said. His voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. You will accept our terms or you will suffer the consequences. This is not a debate. This is not a negotiation. This is reality. Every species learns to bow to the Council eventually. The only question is how much pain you will endure first. Looked up at the 12 platforms surrounding him. 12 ancient species that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. 12 civilizations that believed their age gave them the right to command all others. He thought about President Jin's grandmother, who had lived under occupation. He thought about every human who had ever fought for freedom. He thought about the unanimous vote back on Earth. No, he said. The word hung in the air like a physical object. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. The concept was so alien that it took a moment for the translation devices to even process it. What did you say? The Prime Arbiter asked. No, repeated louder this time. Humanity rejects your terms. We reject your counsel. We reject your authority. We will not surrender our ships. We will not submit to your oversight. We will not accept junior species status. We will govern ourselves, defend ourselves, and make our own choices. You have no right to rule us, and we will not pretend that you do. The chamber exploded into chaos. Council members shouted in a dozen languages. The gallery buzzed with excitement and fear. Some species cheered. Others looked terrified. In 10,000 years, no one had said no to the Galactic Council. You are committing suicide, the Prime Arbiter roared. We will isolate you. We will sanction you. We will prevent any species from trading with you. You will be alone in the darkness, and when you come crawling back, begging for mercy, we will make you serve for 1,000 years instead of 500. You can try, one said, her hand resting on her sidearm, but we're not afraid of you. You should be, the armored crustacean said. We have maintained peace for 10. We have prevented wars. Without the Council, the galaxy will descend into chaos. You haven't maintained peace, said. You've maintained control. There's a difference. Real peace comes from cooperation between equals, not from submission to authority. And if your version of peace requires slavery, then maybe chaos is better. He picked up his and began walking toward the exit. One and followed. Behind them, the Council continued shouting threats and warnings, but the three humans didn't look back. As they reached the door, paused. One more thing, he called out. This entire conversation has been broadcast to every independent species and colony in the galaxy. They've heard everything. Your threats, your history, your exploitation. We're sending them the full files too. Let's see how many species still believe in your authority once they know the truth. They left the chamber while the Council was still processing that information. In the corridor outside, dozens of alien observers stood in silence. Some looked shocked. Others looked thoughtful. A few smiled or made what might have been smiles for their species. Back in the shuttle, finally allowed himself to shake. His hands trembled as he strapped into his seat. That was either the bravest thing we've ever done, or the... Probably both, one said. She was grinning despite the danger. Pulled up his communication feed. Ambassador were receiving messages, hundreds of them, from independent species. Some are offering support. Others are asking questions. 3 species have announced their withdrawing from Council jurisdiction. Looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, billions of humans were watching and waiting. The Council would respond, probably with force. But humanity had made its choice. They had drawn their line. Take us home, said. We have a lot of work to do. The transmission reached every corner of known space within hours. Ambassador's speech, the Council's threats, humanity's defiance. Species that had served the Council for centuries watched in amazement. For the first time in thousands of years, someone had said no and lived to tell about it. First domino fell 12 hours after the broadcast. The species of 6-limbed beings known for their engineering skills issued a public statement. Their representative appeared on every major communication channel. The people have reviewed the evidence presented by humanity. We have also reviewed our own history with the Council. Effective immediately, we are withdrawing from Council jurisdiction. We will govern ourselves and seek partnership with other free species. The second domino fell 6 hours later. The aquatic beings who controlled 3 water worlds announced their independence. Their statement was brief but clear. We joined the Council because we thought we had no choice. Humanity has shown us that we do. We choose freedom. The third came just before midnight Earth time. Though a species that communicated through light patterns sent a message that translated simply as, we stand with humanity. We stand for ourselves. We will not kneel. Within 3 days, 17 species had declared independence from the Council. Within a week, that number grew to 31. Some were junior species still in their probationary period. Others were mid-level members who had been quietly resentful for decades. A few were senior members who had grown disgusted with the Council's methods. The galactic economy shuddered. Trade routes that had functioned smoothly for centuries suddenly became contested. Species that had relied on Council mediation to maintain peace with their neighbors now faced direct negotiations. The carefully maintained order began to crack like ice under pressure. Admiral Ho watched the developments from the bridge of the flagship. Around Earth, humanity's fleet had moved into defensive positions. Every major population center was protected. Every trade route had patrol ships. Every colony had activated its defense systems. Admiral, we're detecting Council scout ships near the outer colonies, reported Captain Rim from her destroyer, the 3 vessels. They're scanning our defenses but keeping their distance. Let them look, Ho said. I want them to see exactly what they're dealing with. All ships maintain defensive posture. Do not fire unless fired upon. But if they cross into our territory, remind them that our space is not a testing ground. Council scouts moved closer, probing the human defense network. They expected the primitive patterns they had seen from other species. Rigid formations, predictable patrol routes, obvious weak points. Instead, they found something that confused them. Human ships moved in loose, adaptive formation. They covered each other's blind spots. They communicated constantly and adjusted in real time. It was chaos to Council's sensors, but it was controlled chaos and far more difficult to predict. One scout ship pushed too far, crossing into the exclusion zone around Nova Sol, humanity's third-largest colony. Captain Rim didn't hesitate. "This is Captain Rim of the Terran Destroyer. You have entered human sovereign space. Leave immediately or we will engage." The Council ship ignored the warning and continued scanning. Rim gave the order, "Fire warning shots. Show them we mean it." This opened up, sending projectiles past the scout ship close enough to register on their sensors but not close enough to hit. The Council ship's shields flared, and for a moment it looked like it might attack. Then two more human destroyers appeared from behind Nova Sol's largest moon, having used the gravity well to hide their signatures. The Council scout calculated the odds and retreated. "Contact broken," Rim reported. "They're withdrawing beyond the exclusion zone." Admiral Ho nodded with satisfaction. "Good. They wanted to test us. Now they know we have teeth. Send the recording to all human vessels. I want every captain to see how to handle Council incursions." But military preparation was only one part of humanity's response. On the colony world of Nova Sol, engineer Sang Ho led a different kind of revolution. He stood in front of a crowd of 10,000 colonists, most of them civilians who had never thought about military matters. "The Council might try to starve us out," Sang Ho explained. "They'll cut trade, block shipments, and make it hard for us to get the resources we need. So we need to become self-sufficient, right now." He displayed plans for new manufacturing facilities. "We have the raw materials. We have the knowledge. What we need is the labor and the will. I'm asking every person on this colony to work extra shifts. I'm asking families to ration their resources. I'm asking everyone to sacrifice for our survival." A woman in the crowd raised her hand. "For how long?" "Until we win," Sang Ho said simply. "Or until we don't need to anymore. I can't promise it'll be easy, but I can promise it'll be worth it. Our children will live free or they won't live as slaves. That's the choice we're making." The crowd was silent for a moment, then someone started clapping. Others joined. Within seconds, the entire plaza erupted in applause. Sang Ho watched them and felt hope. Humanity had always been good at surviving impossible situations. It was practically their specialty. Across human space, similar scenes played out. Factories retooled to produce defense equipment. Farms increased production. Scientists shared research that had been proprietary. Artists created propaganda that boosted morale. Everyone contributed what they could. But the most important work was happening in Doctor's office back on Earth. She had barely slept in 3 days, too busy communicating with the dozens of species that had reached out after the broadcast. Some wanted to join humanity's resistance. Others just wanted information. All of them were watching to see what would happen next. Her latest call was with representatives from the Collective, a group of 12 minor species that had been trading partners with humans. Their leader, translated as Elder Brightwing, appeared on the screen. She looked like a fusion of bird and insect, with iridescent feathers and compound eyes. Dr. Brightwing said, "The Collective has debated for 2 days. Your actions have inspired many of us, but we are afraid. The Council has destroyed species before. How can you be certain they won't destroy you?" Leaned forward, her face earnest. "I can't promise we'll win, but I can promise that we'll fight, and we won't fight alone. We're offering partnership to every species that values freedom, not dominance, not protection, but actual equal partnership. Share technology, share resources, share the burden and the benefit." "The Council offers stability," another said. "What do you offer?" "Dignity," replied. "The right to make your own choices, the right to prosper from your own labor, the right to say no when someone tries to exploit you. Yes, it's riskier. Yes, it's harder, but it's real. The Council's stability is just comfortable slavery." The representatives conferred amongst themselves in their native language, their feathers rippling with color. Finally, Brightwing turned back to the screen. "The Collective will not join the Council's sanctions against humanity. We will continue trade. We will share information. And if the Council tries to punish us for this decision, we will stand with you." It was a small victory, but took it. Every ally mattered. Every species that chose independence weakened the Council's grip. The transmissions from the Council started arriving on the 4th day. Economic sanctions, declared against humanity and any species that traded with them. Threats of military action if humans didn't return to negotiations. Warnings to other species about the dangers of following humanity's example. But the threats rang hollow. The Council was discovering something terrifying. Their power had always depended on everyone believing they were invincible. Once that belief cracked, the whole structure became unstable. 3 more species declared independence. 5 others announced they were renegotiating their Council membership terms. On the 7th day, Admiral Ho received an intelligence report that made him smile. The Council's Central Fleet is mobilizing, his intelligence officer reported. But they're having trouble. 17 species have withdrawn their ships from Council service. Their fleet is at 60% capacity. And they're scared, Ho said. They don't know how to fight a real war. They've been policing unarmed civilians for thousands of years. We're not civilians and we're definitely not unarmed. The Council knew it too. Behind closed doors, the 12 founding species argued. Some wanted to crush humanity immediately, to make an example. Others worried that an attack might trigger a full-scale rebellion. A few, quietly, began to wonder if the old order could survive at all. In a small apartment on Nova Sol, a child asked her mother, "Are the aliens going to hurt us?" The mother knelt down, looking her daughter in the eyes. "Some of them might try, but your dad and Captain Rim and all the people protecting us, they won't let that happen. And even if things get scary, we'll get through it. We always do." "Because we're human?" the child asked. The mother smiled. "Because we're human and because we decided that being free matters more than being safe. Remember that, baby. No matter what happens next, remember that we chose this. We chose to stand up." Across the galaxy, billions of beings were watching, some with hope, some with fear. All of them wondered the same thing: what happens when you say no to the Council? Humanity was about to show them. 6 months had passed since humanity rejected the Council. The galaxy looked very different now. Trade routes that had been stable were being renegotiated. Alliances that had seemed permanent were dissolving. The Council's grip on galactic civilization was slipping, and everyone could see it. In the Council chamber, the 12 founding species faced a crisis they had never imagined. Nearly 40% of their member species had either withdrawn completely or demanded new terms of membership. The junior species that provided most of the Council's labor and resources were refusing to work. The economic system that had enriched the Council for thousands of years was collapsing. The Prime Arbiter's crystal body had lost its usual bright colors, dulled by stress and uncertainty. Around him, the other Council founders argued in increasingly desperate tones. "We must crush the humans," the armored crustacean insisted. "Make an example that will terrify the others back into submission." "With what?" the luminous gas cloud responded. "Half our fleet has withdrawn. The species that remain are watching to see what we do. If we attack humanity and fail, we lose everything. If we attack and succeed but suffer heavy casualties, we still lose everything. The illusion is broken." "Then what do you suggest?" the Prime Arbiter asked tiredly. "That we simply surrender, accept that 10,000 years of order ends because one species of primitives said no." "Maybe the order was always going to end," a new voice said. It belonged to one of the younger Council members, a diplomat who had been watching humanity's resistance with quiet interest. He was called many names, but most knew him as the architect, for his skill in building consensus. "Maybe we built something that could only survive as long as no one questioned it. The humans questioned it, and now we must answer." "Answer with what?" the Prime Arbiter demanded. "With honesty," the architect said, "and with change." Before anyone could respond, an urgent communication came through. "Prime Arbiter, we have an incoming transmission. It's from a coalition of independent species. They're requesting a summit. They want to negotiate a new framework for galactic governance." The Council chamber fell silent. For them to request a summit was unthinkable. For the Council to even consider attending was revolutionary. But what choice did they have? The alternative was to watch their empire crumble while they did nothing. The summit was held on Prime, the same neutral world where the Council station orbited. But this time, the meeting took place on the planet's surface, not in the station. The symbolism was clear. This was a new beginning, not a continuation of the old order. President Jin led the human delegation. Beside her stood Admiral Ho, Defense Minister Min, and Dr. They weren't alone. Representatives from 70 species filled the conference hall, from tiny species barely known to anyone to major powers that had once been Council members. The Council founders entered last, and for the first time in thousands of years, they entered as equals rather than rulers. The Prime Arbiter looked diminished somehow, his crystal body smaller than before. Or perhaps it was just that he was no longer standing on a platform above everyone else. The negotiations lasted for months. Every day, species presented their grievances, their needs, their visions for the future. Arguments broke out constantly. Compromise seemed impossible, but slowly, painfully, a new framework began to emerge. Minister Min sat across from a council military commander discussing security protocols. The problem with your old system, Min said, is that you used force to prevent conflict, but force doesn't prevent conflict. It just postpones it until the pressure becomes unbearable. Then you get explosions. What's your alternative? The commander asked. Transparency, Min replied. Public treaties, open inspections, mutual defense pacts based on choice, not coercion. If species choose to stand together because they share interests and values, that's real security. If they stand together because they're afraid of you, that's just waiting for the fear to fade. In another room, Doctor debated science policy with a group of council researchers. You hoarded knowledge, he said bluntly. You kept advanced technology to yourselves and only shared obsolete versions with junior species. You claimed it was for safety, but it was really about maintaining dominance. Some knowledge is dangerous, a scientist argued. Then teach people how to use it safely, responded. Humanity figured out nuclear fission. We could have destroyed ourselves. We nearly did several times, but we learned. We created safeguards. We shared that knowledge with everyone on Earth. That's how civilization works, not by keeping people ignorant, but by helping them learn wisdom. The hardest negotiations happened in a small room where Doctor met with victims of the council system, species that had lost their individuals whose families had been sent to work camps, entire populations that had been exploited for centuries. How do we forgive this? One of them asked. How do we work with the species that enslaved us? Had no easy answer. I don't know if you can forgive. Maybe you shouldn't, but I know that revenge just creates new cycles of hatred. The council founders didn't start out as tyrants. They started as young species trying to create order. Somewhere along the way, they forgot that power should serve justice, not replace it. We have to build something better, not for their sake, for ours. President Jin spent her time building coalitions. She met with the collective, the engineers, the aquatic worlds. She met with species humanity had never heard of 6 months ago, and she listened. She listened to their fears about chaos, their hopes for freedom, their uncertainty about the future. What do you want from us? Brightwing of the asked during one late-night conversation. Humanity sparked this revolution. Do you want to lead it? No, Jin said firmly. We don't want to replace the council as the new masters. We don't want anyone to have masters. We want partnership. Real partnership where small species have as much voice as large ones, where young civilizations are mentored, not exploited, where disputes are resolved through law and negotiation, not force and intimidation. That sounds idealistic, Brightwing said. It is idealistic, Jin admitted, and it'll be messy and imperfect and sometimes it'll fail, but at least it'll be honest. At least it'll be based on consent rather than coercion. After 5 months of negotiation, the accords were ready. The document was thousands of pages long, but its core principles were simple. All species had equal voice in galactic affairs, regardless of age or size. Membership in the new Galactic Federation was voluntary. Military forces would be contributed by choice for mutual defense, not maintained by a central authority. Technology and knowledge would be shared freely. Economic relationships would be based on fair exchange, not extraction. Disputes would be resolved through arbitration, with penalties for aggression, but no species holding permanent authority over others. The signing ceremony took place in the same conference hall where the summit had begun. Representatives from 112 species added their marks to the document. The council founders signed last, acknowledging that their old empire was over. Prime Arbiter stood before the assembly, and for the first time he spoke without the arrogance of absolute authority. For 10,000 years, my species and our allies believed we were maintaining civilization. We believed that order required hierarchy, that peace required submission, that stability required control. The humans showed us that we were wrong. They showed the entire galaxy that we were wrong. This new beginning is not what we wanted, but perhaps it is what we needed. President Jin gave the closing address. 6 months ago, my ambassador stood in the old council chamber and said no. That word changed everything, but it was never about humanity being special. It was about remembering that dignity is not negotiable, that freedom is worth fighting for, that no one, no matter how old or powerful, has the right to rule others without consent. She looked around the hall at all the different species. We don't know if this new federation will work. Maybe it'll fall apart in 10 years. Maybe it'll evolve into something we can't predict, but at least it'll be ours, all of ours, built by choice, sustained by mutual benefit, and founded on the principle that every being in this galaxy deserves to stand tall. The assembly erupted in applause that lasted for several minutes. When it finally died down, the representatives began to leave, returning to their worlds to begin the hard work of building a new galactic society. 2 years later, Captain Rim commanded a colony ship heading toward the frontier. Her crew was mixed humans and half a dozen other species. They were heading to establish a joint colony on a world that would be governed by all of them equally. In the ship's classroom, she visited a group of young students from different species. They were learning about the recent history, about the Council's fall and the Federation's rise. "Captain," a young human boy asked, "why did the Council surrender? They were so powerful." Rim thought about how to explain it simply. They weren't as powerful as everyone thought. They built their empire on fear and lies. When humanity called their bluff, the whole thing fell apart. But here's the important part. We didn't win because we were stronger. We won because we were willing to stand up even when it looked impossible. We won because we refused to accept that might makes right. A child raised her wing hand. Will there be another council someday? Will someone try to rule everyone again? Maybe, Rim admitted. Power corrupts. There will always be people who want to dominate others. That's why we have to stay vigilant. That's why we teach you this history. So you remember that freedom isn't something you win once and keep forever. It's something you defend every day. She walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the old council station was being converted into a museum, a reminder of what happened when power went unchecked. Somewhere else, the new Federation headquarters was being built, designed so that no species could sit higher than any other. "The most dangerous thing humanity brought to the stars," Rim said softly, "wasn't our weapons or our ships or our tactics. It was the simple idea that we deserved to be free. That idea spread faster than any fleet. It toppled an empire that had stood for 10,000 years. And as long as we keep believing in it, as long as we're willing to defend it, no one will ever make us kneel again." The children looked out at the stars with her, and in their eyes, human eyes, was the same light. The light of beings who knew they were free and who would fight to stay that way. The old order was gone. The new order was uncertain. But for the first time in galactic history, it belonged to everyone, and that made all the difference.